Okay, today's really quick lesson will be the stem changing verbs, and what I want you to keep in mind is that you already know how to conjugate. Don't let the fact that we're adding another step confuse you. You already know how to conjugate the verbs. Excuse me. So all we're doing is that we're throwing in another step. It is one more thing to remember, but it's not a difficult thing to remember if you can group your verbs correctly. And that's what it's going to take some effort on your part in remembering the groups in which these verbs belong. So stem changing verbs is something that we have to learn because it changes the way our verbs are spelled and written. So what I want us to think about first, let's just take a verb that doesn't change stem, okay? We have the verb hablar. Well, stem changing verbs means that we have to locate the stem first. Now, hablar is not a stem changing verb, but it's one you are familiar with, so I want to use it as an example. Hablar is an infinitive verb. Well, our stem is anything that knocks off that infinitive ending. So habl is the stem of our verb hablar. Well, stem changing verbs means that within that stem something is going to change. You have three different types of groups. You have three different groups of stem changing verbs. You have E to IE, O to UE, and E to I. We're going to take a look at the E to IE first, and we're going to talk about how to conjugate these verbs. So let's look at cerrar. Cerrar, what's going to be the stem of our verb cerrar? Yeah, you got it. We're going to knock off the infinitive ending, and we have ser. All right, so that has to change. Well, if we look at the group where cerrar is located, it's an E to IE verb. So then in order to conjugate, you have to change the stem to E to IE. So now it follows the same conjugations as you've learned this entire class. Cierro, cierras, cierra. Now, in the nosotros, we do not change stem. And you might think, oh, Senor Griffin, that's another step to remember. True, but it's easy one to remember if you can draw your shoe. We call these sometimes the boot verbs because we can draw a boot out of the ones that actually change stem. So keep that in mind. As you're conjugating all of these, draw your boot so that you remember that the nosotros never changes stem, okay? Pensar, same thing. Let's locate our stem. There it is. What are we going to change within that stem? E to IE. So, what are our normal AR verb endings? Like you already know. Pienso, piensas, piensa. So what is it going to be in nosotros if we don't change stem? You got it. Pensamos. And then back to our ellos, ellas, ustedes form. Piensan. Alright. Now if you look at the word preferir aquí en la pantalla, I have written second over it. Why do you think I've done that? Right, because in the second E is where we're going to make the stem change. And if you want to think of it another way, it's always the vowel right before the infinitive ending. So there's our infinitive ending of IR. We look back, and there is our, there's the area where we're going to change stem. So it's prefiero, prefieres, prefiere, preferimos, and prefieren. Okay, once again, we make our distinction between the nosotros and we don't change the stem there. Alright, same thing with O to UE. Let's see what color I used. Green. We're going to locate our stem. Well, it's O to UE. There's only one O in the stem, so that's what's going to change. Encuentro, encuentras, encuentra. What do you think? Encontramos, encuentran, encuentran. All right. Make a distinction again. No stem change in nosotros. Jugar is listed with these verbs since it's a U to UE stem change, because the stem change becomes UE. That's why it's listed with these verbs. And it's not a hard one to remember because we've already used it a few times. Just about all of you have used a statement with jugar. You've all told me that you like to play some sport, whatever it is, so you've used the verb jugar before. But it's juego, juegas, juega, jugamos, juegan. Sonar, what do you think it's going to be? It's going to be sueno. It's going to be suenas. It's going to be suenas. I'm sorry, suena. Sonamos and suenan. Now, really important that you look through the list of verbs on page 128. It's important that you go through that list to know what all of these verbs mean. But this one's important especially because there's one that looks almost identical to it, but it's not. It's an ñ and not an ñ. So soñar is to dream. Sonar is to make a sound, to ring. So like your telephone, when it rings, you could use this one right here. You could say, suena mi teléfono. My phone is ringing. My phone is ringing. All right? So let's continue with E to I. Now those are easy because number one, there are only three that we're going to focus on here. And they're just really, really quick. So, pido, pides, pide. And you guys remember your conjugated endings. Okay? So all of these here, it's what you've been doing with the verbs the whole time. Pido, pides, pide, pedimos, because no stem change in the nosotros. And piden. Servir, same thing. Sirvo, sirves, sirve, servimos, and sirven. Okay? Make our distinction. No stem change in the nosotros. I wish I could, pound that into your heads. No stem change in the nosotros. Now I have second written up here again. What do you think that's for? If you take a look, there's our stem. You've got two E's. You've got the possibility of stem changing with two E's. But what's it gonna be? Right, the second one, or if you like to think about it, the one right before the infinitive ending. So it's repito, repites, repite, repetimos, no stem change in nosotros, and repiten. Okay? All right, so that is how you conjugate your stem changing verbs. Remember, know that there are three groups. Know which verbs belong to each group. If you want to do flashcards, I would put the verb on one side. On the other side, put the group that it belongs to. See if you can, lay them out flat and group them and see if you can remember them. If you can remember them with their associated verbs, like if you can remember that encontrar is an O2UE, and you remember that jugar goes to UE, and sonar and soñar go to UE, it's easy. Remember them in their groups and it makes them easier to remember as a whole. Okay? If you guys have questions or anything, email me, meet me in the virtual office, and we'll talk more about these verbs. Take care.